Hey, welcome to Chi Alpha, everybody. All right, opener question for small groups today is, what's something that you're good at? I think it's really fun to try to answer this question, and it's kind of hard to know confidently something that you're good at. Recently, Matt and I were at a conference where this was our opener question, and it was so funny to watch a bunch of adults really struggle to figure out what they're good at. Something that I would say I think I'm decent at, I don't know if I'm good at, is board games. I think in general, I'm decent at playing them, I'm good at understanding them, I enjoy playing them a lot. That I can say with confidence. I do think that it's hard to answer that question, though, for so many of us. And so we're kind of going to be talking about that today in your small groups, is figuring out, what are you good at? But before we get to that, I want to know if there's any of you weirdos out there who are the types of people who begin to read a book or you start to watch a show, and before you watch the whole thing, you go to the end and you watch the last episode or you read the last chapter in a book. I think you're crazy, because if I do that, even if I've just read the first chapter in a book and I go and read the last bit, if I know what happens at the end of a story, I'm never ever going to pick it up again. I could care less about what happens in the middle. It's that idea of having spoilers, and all of a sudden you kind of feel the story is ruined. Well, in what we're going to read today, Jesus is about to give us some spoilers.
You are known for actually dropping spoilers or actually revealing things that maybe shouldn't be out there. And are you babysitting him? Is this what's going on?
I wouldn't say babysitting.
I'm going to give...
And so the parable that we're going to look at is a parable that's in a group of teachings that Jesus is going to do as he and his disciples are walking away from the temple. And this also takes place Jesus is kind of nearing the end before he goes and dies on the cross. So he really starts to focus in on super important things and talking a lot with just his disciples. So it's no longer him talking to the crowds or to the Pharisees. It's a lot more focused on his disciples. So this is one of those times. And so as they're walking away from the temple, his disciples say something along the lines of, "Hey, look at the temple building. Isn't it
beautiful?"
And to be honest, I think that when the disciple says that, I think they're just kind of making small talk. They're like, "Hey, that's pretty." And then Jesus, as Jesus does, is "I know that you're just trying to make small talk, bud, but we're going to take this and make a lesson out of it." So Jesus then says, "Hey, those buildings that you're just calling attention to, they're actually going to be demolished." Which I feel his disciples are "Huh, what? What is happening here?" And then they continue on, and his disciples ask him "Okay, what does he mean by that? And when is that gonna happen?" And they tack on some really quick follow-up questions before Jesus even begins to answer about the temple. And they also say "What will be the signs of your coming and the end of the age?" And so Jesus starts to then answer kind of all of those questions. And so we know that the temple is actually destroyed in history. That happens, but then he also kind of continues on to answer some of those secondary questions that they kind of tack on. And so that idea of when are you coming, and when will be the end of the age? And so I think it's really fun to see kind of the things that Jesus begins to answer and how he goes about answering them. So he's going to use a bunch of parables to tell them what the end is going to look like. And just to be quick and clear, we interpret Jesus talking about a time that has yet to come. So this idea that we believe that the Bible teaches, and even here where Jesus is talking about, that Jesus is going to come again. After the cross and after he ascends into heaven, he's talking about a time where he's going to come back. And whether you agree with that idea of Jesus coming back and there being an end to this age, which is kind of we put those two things together a little bit, we also believe that there is also this end to our time here on this planet for each individual person. So even though Jesus tells us and the disciples the ending, the important thing here is that we can't just be like, oh, it's spoiled, like me watching a show and just being like, well, I don't really care about the middle anymore. All of this is to set up what Jesus says in this parable we should do in the meantime of the life that we have now, in this parable of the talents that we're about to read. It's that we are going to focus on today, not necessarily what he's saying the end is going to look like, but Jesus begins to focus on what should we do now. All right, just some really basic things about this parable before we get into it is the audience of the time of Jesus telling this story. He's going to talk about talents, and a talent is just a measurement of money, and it's actually a really large sum of money, and depending on what area and what time period, the talent range. So it's really hard to say, like, a talent is worth $1 million, because it ranges, and, like, money is different today as it was then, all that stuff. So I can't give you, like, a dollar amount, but what we know is that a talent was a lot of money, and we're talking, like, years and years worth of wages.
Good morning, my darlings. You're coming home with me.
So when it says, like, he gives one guy 5 talents and another servant 1 talent, it's not like the one guy is getting $100 and the other person's getting 10. These are large sums of money that we're talking about. And just another interesting note is that our English word talent, like the word that we use today, is actually derived from this specific parable. Like, we take our meaning of the word talent, or even that word, like, comes out of this parable. And so our usage of that word, which is that idea of having natural abilities or talents, we get our definition from this teaching. And so I think that's really cool, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about, that idea of how do we use our talents, and what does Jesus say that we're supposed to do in the middle? Well, we're waiting for the end, and we know the spoilers, but what are we meant to do right here, right now? I'm super excited for you guys to have this conversation and to figure out what are some of the talents that you have and how can you use them. Have a great small group, have a great discussion, and I'll see you guys next week.